Mya-Rose Craig, welcome to Birdfair. It's absolutely wonderful to have you here because I know you've got a lot of interesting stories to tell. And in your relatively short time on this planet, you have done some very, very interesting things. And the first thing that I want to talk to you about today is your impressive record of traveling around the planet and seeing 5,000 bird species. And I think I'm right in saying you were the youngest person to ever do that. There is probably so many things we can talk about here, but what's it like having achieved that? What's it like having hit that 5,000?
Yeah, wow. I mean, firstly, it's quite exciting to even be talking at Birdfair this year because I hadn't been since I was about 9 because we've actually been traveling every summer since. But I think just having seen that many birds is so amazing, and I mean, I love birding so much, and for me, it just felt like very gratifying to have I'm a bit of a numbers person. It makes me feel like obviously I like just seeing the birds and enjoying them and stuff, but number I find quite satisfying as well. And I think just like a big brown number like that just felt amazing. But the one for me that was really exciting was when I got the numbers. I think it's actually changed since I saw the bird, but like when I got to seeing half the world's birds, which was about 300 on from that rock bunting, that was my 5,000th. That was incredibly exciting, not just for having seen that many, like that bonkers amount of birds, but also because well, when I went to Ecuador when I was 8, one of the birds I picked out of the ID book was a harpy eagle, and I just fell in love with it, and I thought this is like a gorgeous bird and I have to see it. And we didn't. And then a few years later we tried again and we didn't see it. And then we didn't see it. And then we went to Brazil last summer and it was like, oh yeah, this is a terrible time for harpy eagles. You're not going to see one. But I was I was quite desperate and I sort of begged the guide to at least give it a shot. So we went to this old nesting site and it wasn't there, and we waited for hours, and then like the morning before we got our plane we decided to give it one last shot. And there was this amazing juvenile harpy eagle just sat up in the tree like it was waiting for us to appear, and it was just so exciting. Like my mum says she's never seen me smile so much in my life.
And
And it was,
how big was it? Because they're massive birds, aren't they?
yeah, it was enormous, and it was like I knew that they were big, but it was seeing one in real life, like 100 meters up in a tree, and it still looked enormous, and it was just, yeah, like very, very exciting, very exciting.
Do you remember when you started, like what your number one was, or did the list slowly emerge as you got older and you thought, hang on a minute, I'm gonna aim for 5,000, or was there a point where you thought this is the number one bird, this is the first one?
Um, well, it's a bit fuzzier than that because my list starts from when I was 4 years old, because my parents felt like they could I was definitely seeing the birds that I was looking at and like knowing what they were, you know.
Hmm.
But I actually remember going on twitches and going on birding trips younger than that, and I do remember some of the birds I saw and stuff. So I think in a way it's sort of impossible to say what that very first bird was because they've always been like such a big part of my life and they've just always been there. Um, but the first twitch I ever went on when I was 9 days old, that was to see the lesser kestrel down at the Isles of Scilly. So I guess that could be my first bird, because that was quite an exciting one.
It's not a bad one to start with, is it really? Pretty impressive bird to begin a 5,000 list. Actually, where are you up to now? What number you're on now?
Um, I'm not actually 100% sure because I think, like I said, I think some birds have been added to the list. Um, but I'm in the late 5,300s, I'd say. And actually, well, it's quite sad because I was planning on going to China this autumn for birding because I've heard it's like my dad went there a few years ago and it sounded amazing. Like I was very jealous. Um, but I'm not sure that's an option anymore. So
Something to look forward to in the future as you aim to double your double your number. But you're right, actually, you made a very good point earlier that some species get recategorized, don't they? So you might have seen one, but it might now be three, or you might have seen two or
mm.
three, and they're now regrouped as one. Have there been a few of those? Because that must be really
Oh yeah,
frustrating.
definitely. Like my list is always shifting. So like that harpy eagle that now is my half the world's birds wasn't when I saw it. It was a bird that I saw like a few days before. but like some of the species that I seen, they got split. Obviously some of them got lumped as well, but that's less exciting. Some of them got split, and sometimes it's quite nice. I'm just sat at home and I can see my list is like going up, and I haven't even done
It's growing itself without
yeah,
having to do anything. It's just rather lucky. I'm going to ask you about hornbills because this year's Birdfair cause is saving the helmeted hornbill, and I wondered whether you'd encountered any of those species and what that was like.
Yeah, in general, I mean, I love hornbills. I remember the first time I saw one when we went on holiday, and it just felt just like it was a very exciting bird. And helmeted hornbill is definitely also one of my favorite hornbills I've seen, just because they're very strange looking in real life, which always adds a bit more excitement to it. You know, I saw them in Borneo a few years ago, and I think like that first time that we saw them flying through the trees, and they're like really big, and it was just, yeah, it was, I don't know, it felt almost like something out of a film, because it felt very like tropical, like we were in the jungle now, you know.
And now, obviously, with this year, we've all been restricted pretty much to our local patches for months. What's that been like? And have you managed to get the same level of enjoyment out there? You're obviously in your local area, perhaps not adding to that big list now, but do you get the same level of enjoyment as sort of a bit of casual birding? Does that benefit you as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I talk about the world birding more just because it's a bit more exciting for other people to hear about. But I do really enjoy local birding. And this summer's actually been really nice because, like I said, I'm not actually about this time of year. So for me, the really exciting thing has been watching all of the like chicks hopping around and like the breeding season. And like, I guess in a way, it feels like I'm re-exploring this place that I've lived in for years and years because I'm seeing it in a way that I just haven't before. And just in general, I've had loads more time for birding than usual, so it's just been, yeah, really nice, to be honest, to just be able to go out and look at things.
So you sounds like you've been making the most of it, even though you've not been able to get out and about. And hopefully China will wait until next year or the year after. Um, One of your obviously big passions is trying to sort out getting more people out birding and enjoying nature and addressing the issues that we have around diversity in the conservation sector. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how what you've encountered and what you've worked on?
Yeah, of course. I think, well, the first part of this project that I started doing was these nature camps in the summertime that were bringing kids that usually didn't have the opportunity to go out into nature, to go out into the countryside, and like doing that kind of stuff with them. And to be honest, my original reason, it wasn't anything super like political or campaigny. It was literally just like nature played such a big role in my life, and I felt so lucky to have been like going bird watching forever, and I felt really sad that like I was only 13 and I felt really sad that other kids weren't getting that same opportunity, which is that's why I originally started doing this stuff. And after a few years I set up my organization Black to Nature, and I'm now doing a lot of campaigning in the nature sector to sort of, you know, just change the way we go out and talk to people about nature and stuff like that, and just make it a lot more engaging. Because something I've been talking about a lot is the fact that like not everyone engages with nature in the same way. And like for me or you, like putting on our bins and going down to the local nature reserve to look at waders, like that's quite exciting, but that doesn't do it for most people. And
So
I
it's no
think,
point.
yeah, and I think just like, you know, figuring out other ways to talk to people, and I've been doing that for quite a few years now, and it's working. So
And one of the things I like about bird watching is that you can strike up conversations with people, and sometimes you get quite lucky chatting to someone, and they'll point things out. And certainly, I think looking back over my years birding, some of the best birds I've seen for the first time have been through someone else's telescope.
mm,
And I think we really need to encourage more of that and say, if you see someone who looks like a novice wandering into the hide and looks a bit confused, don't tell them to shush or get out. Just beckon them over to your telescope and say, look, I've got this amazing bird down through my lens. And I know that's probably the kind of thing you're doing as well, isn't it?
yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm kind of the same, because at first, if someone's like chatting really loudly or something, my first instinct is like, can you not see the whatever?
Yeah.
But I think like I've just try and make an effort to chat to people, and a lot of the time it's not just for their sake. I really enjoy it as well. Like it was only a few days ago I went down to Sturt, and there wasn't much about. There weren't that many people about. Weather was a bit miserable, but we started chatting to this this like older guy who didn't go birding that much but wanted to pop down, and it was really nice, and he was like telling us all about like what it used to be before, and it was just a really nice conversation. And I think one of my favorite things about birding, especially when I was younger, was like turning up somewhere and all our family friends just being there and having like a proper chat as we looked at the birds and stuff, and it was just fun.
And there are often good places where you can do that without disturbing the birds. There are often some quite well-designed hides or structures or places that you can stand where you can look out across a vista and you can still pick birds out without scaring them away. Back to Nature is a really interesting one because you've got a lot of kids who've gone out into the countryside for the first ever time and encountered things they would never have normally shown an interest in. And you talk about introducing them to nature by stealth. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So nature by stealth sort of came from the fact that we started thinking about like the different ways to engage with nature, and the fact that actually a lot of people that haven't gone out into green spaces are that are from like urban areas are a bit prejudiced against them because they have this concept of what it's going to be like. And basically, nature by stealth is doing activities with kids that they're interested in, like a filmmaking workshop or I don't know, hanging out with their mates and playing football, but it just happens to be out in a green space, and they're surrounded by nature and they're surrounded by wildlife, and it's just, you know, they notice it and they appreciate it without being like prejudiced against it before they even start, and it works really well, and the kids always have a really good time.
And you've talked before a little bit about how there are cultural barriers into getting certain groups of people out into the countryside who just don't feel it's for them, but when they discover it through your camps, for example, they think it's wonderful and they want to get out and do more. What are those barriers in getting groups like ethnic minorities, you say visible minority ethnic groups, out into the countryside for the first time? What are the barriers that they're facing?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the difficulties is there isn't like one single barrier that we bring down and then they'll all flood out here, and it is a really complicated issue, and we did like a whole conference about it. And I think, you know, there's a real range, and it goes from stuff that a lot of people don't really think about, like the fact that a lot of elders in these communities don't really have clothes that are suitable for wandering around like in normal British weather, or the fact that a lot of people from these communities are very, very scared of dogs and don't want to go into spaces where they are worried there might be dogs about, or even, I don't know, a lot of the kids don't have like suitable footwear for going out and about. But there's also like a lot more difficult issues as well, like the fact that a lot of these communities do feel hyper aware that in their opinion the countryside isn't very welcoming and it's not somewhere where they're supposed to be, and you know, it's like a very white space in their opinion, basically. And
so how do we tackle that as a birder? I'm out in the countryside. How can I make people feel more welcome? Because that's what I want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think you don't need to do these big gestures where you're going like, hello, yes, you're welcome here. It's just like being friendly, really. Like, for example, when we went on a walk a couple of days ago, there was this lady who had like very clearly ventured out of the city to go on a nice walk, and there was no parking, and that no one was like helping her get through the car park or anything like that. And it's just like little things, like the fact that we just, even though we were in front, we just stopped and let her get through and park up, and like we had a bit of a chat with her after she came out of her car. And it's just like, it's the same thing we do with everyone, where you're just being nice and friendly and like, yeah, having a chat with people, and it just makes people feel welcome. Yeah.
I think that's entirely right. I think it's just extending the courtesy that you would to everybody and just making sure that everyone feels that they can share this wonderful countryside that we have here. Now, you have, among your many things that you've managed to achieve, you are now also the youngest British person to receive an honorary degree. Is that right?
Yes.
And that was for the bird count, right? How did that come about?
Yeah, so basically they sent me an email and said, we think that your work with Black to Nature is amazing, and we'd like to give you an honorary doctorate. And my parents and I did think it was a spam mail at first, like we thought it was a joke because it just seemed
straight in the bin.
Yeah, absolutely bonkers. But we did some Googling, we did some research, and we realized that it was like legitimate. And it was just crazy. And I think yeah, I ended up going to the fancy ceremony and getting my scroll in February, so just before the pandemic happened. And I think, like, obviously it was absolutely crazy, like I said, but for me also it was very exciting because I don't know, it was a real acknowledgement that I'm trying to do good stuff, and especially because it wasn't from, like, you know, people that are in my circles, people that are doing similar stuff to me or think that what I'm doing is good, but from this like really important big institution who's like very traditional. And I think they said in like the speech, like, we don't agree with a lot of what she says, but we think it's very cool that she's saying it. And I just found that quite funny. Yeah.
Well, what do you do now? Because if you've got an honorary doctorate, does that mean you give up school? You're right, well, I've done it now.
I'm actually a massive nerd. I really enjoy, like, actively enjoy school. So I'm taking a gap year, but I am going to uni in 2021. And I guess, I don't know, I just want to carry on doing the stuff I do. I want to make sure that Black to Nature can carry on after I go to uni and doesn't just sort of crumble. And I don't know, just carry on talking about stuff that I feel is important, I guess, and carry on birding, obviously.
Of course, of course. How can people find out about Back to Nature? Where can they go for information?
Um, the best places at the moment are my Twitter, which is Birdgirl UK, or my blog, which is just Birdgirl blog. So, yeah.
Wonderful. And finally, before we finish, how can we've talked a little bit about getting young people out into the countryside? Have you got any tips for young people who are just getting started in birding? We've sort of semi-hooked them; they're not quite there yet. What are your tips for getting that started?
I think there's a few things. I mean, firstly, even like you might be looking around at the other birders that are there, but you don't need the poshest bins and you don't need the poshest scope. Like, all you really need is a pair of eyes and just to look at things. And I think also just figuring out why birding appeals, because for some people it's like the listing and the seeing the things and writing it all down. And if so, you can like sort of, you know, get that competitive spirit and really get into it. But for some people it's a lot more like relaxing and calm and going out into a green space. And if so, I think it's really nice to just go out on walks and really like just spend time in green spaces. But I think at the end of the day, just going out and looking at birds makes you a bird watcher, and then you're sorted.